Hi, everybody. Now that you have had time to do the stations and you've had time to learn about the vocabulary for this unit, we're going to do the interactive notes. This is something that you will be doing independently, and then I will go over some explanations when we do the actual written notes for the review. So this is genetics, and as usual, you're going to start with the two essential questions. What is genetics, and how are Punnett squares used to describe the genetic relationship between parents to offspring? And if you were quizzed today, which one of these would you already know, and which question would you need more help with? And you can just put the number there. Okay, so genetics is the study of heredity, which is a biological process where a parent passes certain genes on to their offspring. Genes are inherited from both parents through sexual reproduction, and these genes express specific traits or characteristics. So in this case, you're going to take this definition, heredity, and describe it in your own words. And I want you to just think about in your own life. You have parents who have passed down traits to you. So maybe you look more like your dad than you do like your mom, and maybe your sister looks more like your mom than your dad. Or let's even think about you have a litter of kittens, and some of the kittens look like the mom, and some look like the dad. So all the traits are passed down to the offspring. We learned about this in the first place from a man named Gregor Mendel. This is not the first time we brought up his name. He is considered to be the father of modern genetics because he's the one who came up with the basics first. He was a monk from Austria. If you don't know what a monk is, please go ahead and look that up and send me an email for some extra credit. Discovered the basic principles of heredity. So he went through and was gardening and looking through his garden and making observations about the pea plants, and he noticed that there were traits that followed a specific pattern. And based on this information, this is a very simplistic explanation, but this is how we know what heredity and genetics is today. He came up with the dominant and recessive traits. He realized that some showed up more often than not, and he noticed that there was a pattern to this. So some of the things you already have learned that we're going to review before we begin are that chromosomes are found in the nucleus, which you can see in this picture right here. Remember, the chromosomes are those X's, and they carry genes on them. Okay, and here is the example of the DNA with the strand of gene. Genes are segments of DNA on a chromosome and are responsible for inherited traits. So what is the relationship between chromosomes and DNA? And you can use this bullet right here to answer that question. Let's see. So this is use the word bank below to label the location of genetic material in a cell, then answer the question in the text boxes provided. So this is review. So I can't because I have it on present mode, but you are going to click on the vocabulary word and you are going to label that part of the cell. So the chromosomes, DNA, genes, and nucleus, and you can use the previous slide to help you. And then what is genetics and who is considered the father of genetics? Both of those questions are on the previous slides. Okay. This one says don't peek, slide this over when you have answered the previous slide. So this is going to give you the definitions. I'm not going to do it. I'll just show you. Oh, I can't because I have it on present mode. Let me take it out of present mode for a moment and just show you. This moves, and as you move it, it'll give you the answers to your previous slide. So you can check to see if you did them correctly or not. Okay. And then look at the graphic above. What do you think the word genotype and phenotype mean? By looking at this and looking at this and thinking about what you've already learned, and then type the definitions for genotype and phenotype. And actually, come to think of it, now I remember this one. This was incorrect here. You're moving this after you've answered genotype and phenotype here. So if you don't know the definitions, go ahead and I'm giving you permission to peek. Okay, I want you to think about it for a second. If you don't know the genotype of a plant with flowers that have a dominant color, what is the best way to determine it? So think back to what we learned during our exploration stations, and what could you do if you don't know? what could you use to determine it? It's a tool that we use, and I'll give you a hint, it's a square. The next thing I'd like you to know is that alleles are differences in a gene. We call that a variant. They occur on a fixed spot on a chromosome. So here's an example on the slide to the right, or in the picture to the right. In humans, an allele might indicate blood type, color blindness, or other traits. And what does the allele indicate in this pair of homologous chromosomes? And it tells you right here, it's the allele for white flower on this one and an allele for purple flower. There are dominant and recessive alleles, and the dominant show their effect with only one copy of the allele, whereas recessive alleles show their effect with two. So you have to have two lowercase letters to show the recessive, but you only need one uppercase letter to show the dominant. Long hair is a recessive trait in cats. How many copies of the allele is needed for the traits to show? Here is your hint. I'm circling it with my arrow. Inherited traits are genetically determined characteristics, meaning whether you have brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes comes from your parents. Offspring has a combination of both parents' genes. Examples are skin, hair, eye color, height, and freckles. Dominant traits in dogs would be short hair, brown eyes, large ears, curly hair, ears that stand up. And recessive traits would be long hair, blue eyes, small ears, straight hair, and droopy ears. And you're going to answer these two questions based on that previous slide. And then using this table, you're going to, again, answer the questions. So if a cow only had the dominant phenotype, what traits would be shown? Okay, and you'll have to look at what the dominant are. Individual cows who do not show phenotype related to recessive traits could have what type of genotype, and you take a look over here and see if you can answer that question. I'm going to not get into it too much because I want you to think about this question. We will review it. Definitions for homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and heterozygous. This is repetitive from when we did the Quizlet. Carries two copies of the same dominant allele, two uppercase letters for homozygous dominant. Homozygous recessive carries two copies of the same recessive allele, lowercase, and heterozygous is the uppercase and the lowercase. And you can go ahead and answer these two questions using this chart above and the definitions to the left. This is going to be a slide and drop, and I want you to pay attention to the description goes at the top and the example goes on the bottom. So use the examples would be the letters, and the descriptions or the written portion, use the previous slides to help you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and I will continue with the rest of the notes for another class.